Welcome back to Gerodynamics. Okay, so I wanted to do a quick political video discussing the protests that are going around, mostly at the college campuses, but kind of protests in general, just to kind of give my take on these things. Um, the protests that are happening on college campuses. So there's a number of issues with what's going on, but first and foremost, I do want to reiterate that I am a supporter of protesting, even if I disagree what a person is protesting for. I believe we have a First Amendment right to it. We have a right to peacefully assemble. We have a right to protest. Um, and there really aren't a lot of limitations on that other than you should not be protesting in a way that takes away the rights of somebody else. You should not be protesting in a way that could impact someone else in a negative way, such as causing them to even become hurt or injured. It shouldn't turn into a riot. It shouldn't turn into violence. It shouldn't turn into vandalizing. You shouldn't block a road to prevent, which may prevent an ambulance or a person in a vehicle from getting to a hospital. And in the case of these college campuses, you shouldn't be preventing people from being able to move across campus and be able to get to their classes. There is a way to protest without doing that, and college campuses have been this place for decades. So, college campuses have been a focus of protests for a very long time. However, we are seeing some of them step over the lines of what should be, considered allowable, in that they are one, they are preventing people from going to class. They are, in some situations getting violent, in some situations harassing people specifically based on their ethnicity or their religion, whether they're Jewish or whether they are, a white individual that is just trying to go to class. Or even any race really, if they don't answer in the correct manner to the challenges that they're putting to them, as far as whether they support Israel or support Palestine, that sort of thing. Um, and so, in some cases, hostages are being taken. In some cases, they are preventing people from being able to go and use their meal cards to be able to eat. So, some people are going hungry. And in general, people are not able to get to classes which they paid for. So, these things are things that should not be happening, should not be allowed to happen. Um, and that's where you cross over the line. There are plenty of ways to protest without doing these things. Um, the other thing is, most of these college campuses are private institutions. So a private institution is allowed to say that you are not allowed to protest in a certain way on their property. Um, Now they need to give protesters leeway, and I do think that that's true, but they don't have to. It's not They're not required to. Public institutions, public education, like say state universities or community colleges, that sort of thing. Those have less of a right to be able to just remove people from campus just for protesting, because they are public universities or public educational systems. But the private institutions, if they say they don't want you in a specific place or protesting in a certain way, then you have to listen to them. Otherwise, you are trespassing, and they do have the right to remove you through physical means. Um, Now, keep in mind that we are seeing some pushback that's pushing back too far in the other direction, where police forces are coming in, or National Guard is coming in, and it's getting a little bit carried away. And I understand sometimes that is required because things have gotten too violent or too out of control. I haven't really seen too much of that. I don't like how they're protesting, but I haven't seen a lot of violence. More the harassment, the racism that is involved, the anti-Semitism that's involved. is, more what you're seeing as opposed to actual violence and vandalism and other sorts of crimes like that. But it is happening in some cases. And if it was to escalate to that point, then yeah, maybe you would need some sort of actual, stronger responses. But I think that, sometimes we're seeing too much. We're seeing, police forces or National Guards go in and maybe they're, their taking too much leeway, especially with journalists. I saw a person with a camera, obviously, not just an individual with their private camera like I have or something like that, but an actual, larger camera get thrown into the ground. And that's not appropriate at all, because that's even going in the other direction and violating the rights of freedom of press. So we do need to be really careful with those sorts of things. However, if someone is out there and they're out in the street and they're blocking the street, I do think the police should be able to come in and physically remove them if that's what's necessary. So it's a fine line, and we're never going to get it perfect. But if we can see, more of a peaceful protest, even though in a lot of cases they are, but extra cautious. Be extra cautious with your protesting, as far as being peaceful. And then, when police intervention or National Guard or whoever is called in, when you come in, you need to be a little bit more careful with how you're responding to these groups. Um, what they're protesting, obviously, I am more of a supporter of Israel. I do think that Israel has a right to defend itself, that they were attacked. Whether you think the attacks were justified, you can't justify what they did during those attacks, no matter what you think the justification was for the attacks. And if you do, then you support rape, murder, and taking hostages and all of these other things that happened, and that's not appropriate. Um, Israel is in a tough spot where retaliating against Hamas is usually going to impact the Palestinian people, the civilians in that are not a part of Hamas, and so it's hard to find that line of where you're going to be able to respond to a point where you're defending yourself and you're trying to remove the threat, but not create more of a threat by impacting the civilian population too much. Um, what what needs to happen is some sort of way to really get the people on your side, do things that really get them on your side so they help you remove Hamas. But it's really, really maybe beyond being able to do that at this point with, the animosity that's there. So, I do side with Israel. I do think maybe they could be more careful in their responses. So that's my position on that. But I will support Israel moving forward. That's who I think is in the right. Their nation is a nation that has existed for quite a while. They have won their wars, and they have a right to be there. And as far as I can tell, people within the boundaries of Israel are treated quite well, and are taken care of no matter what their race ethnicity is. But when they have to secure off this separate area and try to keep it a separate nation and prevent it from attacking it, maybe sometimes they do some things that aren't exactly um, going to cause people to be supportive of those actions. And so again, it's a fine line, as figuring out how to solve this. And usually these people that are protesting, just unabashedly are anti-Semites that don't believe that Israel should exist, and then once Israel doesn't exist, they'll continue on and wipe out the Jews in one way or another. Just Israel not existing is the first goal. So that's usually what we're running into, and we can't allow that to take place. Okay, but back to protests. Oftentimes we are seeing, I think it's so shocking for a lot of people to see the crackdown on the Palestinian protesters, because usually what you're seeing is more aggressive responses to protesters that are not of that persuasion. So, so this is the hypocrisy of how we deal with protesters in this country. If someone is peacefully protesting as a pro-life protester, they're going to go to jail, and they're going to have the book thrown at them. If you're peacefully protesting on in Washington D.C. in response to the election, they're going to throw the book at you. And of course, I'm not talking about those that did commit vandalism or acts of violence. They all should be punished to a certain degree, not as much as they have been. They weren't. They weren't insurrectionists. They weren't traitors. They weren't doing anything like that. They were protesting. It got out of hand. Some of them were violent. Some of them committed vandalism. All should be punished. But the vast majority, as the left likes to say, was a mostly peaceful protest, and there should be no consequences for that. But there are. People are being, targeted. They're being arrested. They're being put in jail. They're not being given their rights, their right to a speedy trial, all because of what they were protesting for, not how they were protesting. And we see this across the board. If you're protesting from what most would consider the right, they want the book thrown at you. If you're protesting out in front of the Supreme Court justices' homes because you oppose overturning Roe versus Wade, resulting in someone attempting to assassinate the Supreme Court justices, that's completely fine. No problems with that. But if you're out and you're praying in front of Planned Parenthood, nope, you got to be thrown in jail for the rest of your life. It's just an extreme amount of hypocrisy in the way that we deal with protesters. And I just want you guys to really think about that when you're attacking people who protested, for things that you disagree with, from both sides. If you from all sides, if you wouldn't want it to happen to people that are protesting for something you agree with, then you shouldn't want it to happen to people who are protesting for something you disagree with. The First Amendment is not a right to free speech when people agree with your speech. It's not a right to protest when people agree with your protest. That's the whole point. It's a right to do those things when people don't want those things done, when they disagree with it, when it's hard to hear. And oftentimes, I'm going to disagree with someone for what they're saying and what they're protesting for, but completely agree that they have the right to do it. And that's where I stand. If you have any questions or want to make any comments, feel free down below. And yeah, I'm going to do a couple more videos, and I'll be right back. But everybody take care. Have a good day.